When it comes to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, there's one thing that many individuals forget as a part of their long-term care plan, and this can have a significant impact on the way that they feel every day. Hey, I'm going to go through what are the most common nutrient deficiencies associated with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in this video. And this is an important part of the bigger process. And the reason is that many times when we look at small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, the immediate thought is, let's deal with the overgrowth. Let's get that overgrowth under control. Hey, that's important. You have to do that. You have to get those bacterial numbers back under threshold, back down to a level in the small intestine that is generally seen and it's not considered an overgrowth pattern. But that's only step one. And there's 3 steps in this whole process. The second step is you have to replete the digestive secretions, the acid, the enzymes, the bile. You have to make sure your motility in your bowels is good, that your bowel time, your transit time, how long it takes things to move through your gastrointestinal tract, that has to be normal as well. But there's a third component to this that typically is overseen that we really need to pay attention to, and that more importantly, I would emphasize is known as a characterization of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So what I'm getting ready to share with you, keep in mind, is a characteristic of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that characteristic is nutrient deficiencies, and very overt nutrient deficiencies. What nutrients are we talking about? Well, I want to put these into 3 categories for you, and I'll explain these. There's fat-soluble deficiencies, fat-soluble nutrient deficiencies. There's B vitamin deficiencies, and there's nutrient deficiencies that are associated with protein. And so let's start off with the fat-soluble vitamin deficiencies. That's vitamin A, D, E, and K. Not uncommon for SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, we'll call it SIBO from here on out. Not uncommon for SIBO to cause a malabsorption state in the small intestine, creating an inflammatory state locally at the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. And when this happens and this malabsorption takes place, what we see is that those nutrients, those fat-soluble nutrients, don't begin to move. They don't move across the gastrointestinal lining as efficiently as they should, and hence malabsorption. Part of the other problem that can be linked with this is that many that deal with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO are going to have a reduction in bile acid secretions from the liver and then concentrated in the gallbladder, released into the small intestine. When you have that reduction in bile, that is going to translate to a lack of emulsification of fat. So you're not breaking the fats down to the level that they need to be. And then that's going to inhibit those fat-soluble nutrients from being extracted off of those food sources, off of those fat sources coming in through the diet. So number 1 in this list of nutrient deficiencies is going to be fat-soluble nutrients. Number 2 are going to be the B vitamins. And here's what we need to establish with the B vitamins. The bacteria in your gut make all of the B vitamins. And you absorb, so you take in a portion of B vitamins from your gut, or through your gut, through your food. So you ingest foods that have B vitamins in them, and that's going to contribute to your total B vitamin intake for the day. And then also the bacteria in your large intestine are going to be producing B vitamins, and they're going to contribute to another portion of your total B vitamin intake every day. When you have these overgrowth patterns in your small intestine, those B vitamins that you're taking in, those are actually being taken and used by those bacteria that are overgrown. They're being utilized before you can assimilate those and gain the benefit from them. Also, many times when these overgrowth patterns, when SIBO has become prolific enough, it will stunt the production of B vitamins lower in the gastrointestinal tract in the large intestine. So that's also a factor that we have to consider. So B vitamins across the board, B1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, all 8 B vitamins are going to be affected potentially here. B12 does seem to be very high on the list, but my rule of thumb with this is if I see a patient when I'm doing micronutrient testing that has 5 or more B vitamin deficiencies, maybe 4, depending on what their total symptoms are, you have dysbiosis and potentially some type of overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestine. So that's the second category. The third category is going to be nutrients that are related to protein. And so these are going to be things like the amino acids themselves. You're going to find that B12, iron, zinc, selenium, phosphorus. These are all going to be nutrients that are potentially deficient when it comes to an overgrowth of bacteria and not being able to extract those nutrients, because remember, a factor many times for SIBO is that there's a reduction of acid in the stomach, and you need that acid to start breaking down the food and then ultimately to help cleave those nutrients off of those food sources so that you can then in turn assimilate those. And so if that acid is insufficient, it's not only opening the door for the overgrowth, it's also reducing the availability of those nutrients for assimilation. And again, that's affecting things like B12, zinc, iron, selenium. Now, certainly if you think about those, iron, B12, zinc, those are nutrients that are known to affect the red blood cells. They are associated with the maturation of red blood cells and red blood cell turnover. So very often individuals can develop an anemia if a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a SIBO pattern, is allowed to persist for a long enough period of time. So something to consider there. Now, I did want to make special mention when it comes to nutrients like vitamin D, vitamin A. Vitamin A reduction in night vision is often seen with vitamin A deficiency. So if you see a reduction in your vision and just night vision more specifically, and you have these symptoms that are associated with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, the bloating, the gas, distension in your abdomen, especially where it can be painful and it's especially quickly happening after eating, changes in weight, groupings of nutrient deficiencies. These are the things that can point to that vitamin A deficiency might be related to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. What about vitamin D? Vitamin D is linked to a number of different things: glucose regulation. We think about immune system function, blood pressure. The list goes on and on in terms of bone health. If someone has autoimmunity, vitamin D is very essential in helping to regulate the immune system in autoimmune cases. So we can see where vitamin D would be an essential nutrient to have adequate stores of, but how it can also be reduced when we start to see a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And there's multiple reasons for that. It's not simply related to just a lack of intake or utilization. Vitamin D also internally is produced when we have adequate availability of B5. And so B5 being a B vitamin, of course, those B vitamins are another category of nutrients that are going to be affected there. So what do you take away from this? Do you just throw a multivitamin at the end of your small intestinal bacterial growth protocol? I would say that the answer to that is an emphatic no. And the reason you don't do that is because we want to make sure that each nutrient deficiency is targeted at the level that it needs to be corrected at, and that high dosing of one nutrient is not opening the door for a nutrient-nutrient interaction. So what that would mean in another way is that high dosing of one nutrient is not potentially creating a nutrient deficiency elsewhere. Folate, B12 being prime examples of this conversation, but by no means the only ones here. So a better strategy on this would be to, as a part of a comprehensive SIBO protocol, deal with the overgrowth, deal with the replacement of the digestive secretions and motility that need to be dealt with. And then step 3 is going to be assess your micronutrients and replace those micronutrients at levels that are unique to you, so that you can deal with what I many terms call and classify as the collateral damage of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You can deal with that as your body needs it. So keep in mind, nutrient deficiencies are considered a characteristic of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we want to target that characteristic, because correcting that is going to ultimately translate to how you feel on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully that helps you out, guys, and hopefully that gets you to one step closer to beginning to feel better. So until next time, I'm Dr. Arland Hill. I'll talk to you soon.